Hello, ghouls and goblins. You're just in time for a true crime story so blood-curdling creepy that it remains one of America's greatest cold cases. Let's examine the Cleveland torso murders of the 1930s. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for news stories, documentaries, and movie reviews. On a quiet, moonless night in February 1934, the city of Cleveland, Ohio, was gripped by a freezing wind off Lake Erie. The Great Depression had turned the industrial hub into a landscape of desperation, where thousands lived in shanty towns in an area nicknamed Kingsbury Run, a dark, jagged ravine that sliced through the city's underbelly. Two vagrants were scavenging for scrap metal when they stumbled upon something that would change the history of American criminology forever. It wasn't just a body, it was a surgical masterpiece of horror. This was the beginning of the Cleveland torso murders, a case so gruesome, so precise, and so baffling that it would eventually bring down the legendary Eliot Ness. Most people know Eliot Ness for taking down Al Capone in Chicago. He was the man who couldn't be bought, the leader of the Untouchables. By 1935, Ness had moved to Cleveland to serve as the safety director, tasked with cleaning up a city plagued by corruption and organized crime. He expected to fight mobsters and bootleggers. He did not expect to hunt a ghost who carved people into pieces with the skill of a master surgeon. The killer's signature was chillingly consistent. He didn't just kill his victims, he dismantled them. Most of the victims were decapitated while they were still alive, their heads removed with a single, clean sweep of a heavy blade. Their bodies were often drained of blood, washed, and posed in the mud of the ravine. In many cases, the torsos were precisely bisected at the waist. The anatomical knowledge required suggested that the killer wasn't just a maniac with a kitchen knife. He was likely someone with medical training, a butcher, or an undertaker. First official victims were found in September 1935. Two male bodies were discovered at the bottom of a hill in Kingsbury Run. Both had been decapitated. One was Edward Andraschi, a young drifter with a criminal record. The other was never identified. What terrified the police was the skin. The skin on one of the bodies had been treated with a chemical agent that turned it tough and leathery, as if the killer were trying to preserve his work or experiment with the physical properties of flesh. As the body count rose, a pattern emerged that made the investigation nearly impossible. The killer targeted the submerged 10th, the invisible members of society. These were the transients, the prostitutes, and the laborers who lived in the shanty huts near the railroad tracks. In a pre-digital age, these people had no paper trails. Many of them were never reported missing because no one was left to miss them. Of the 12 official victims attributed to the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, only 2 were ever positively identified. When you don't know who the victim is, you can't find the motive, and without a motive, you can't find the killer. By 1936, the city was in a full-blown state of panic. The press nicknamed the killer the Mad Butcher, and every morning residents checked the headlines with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. Eliot Ness was under immense pressure. His reputation as a miracle worker was on the line. He poured every resource into the case, but the butcher seemed to be playing a game. In June of that year, a young man's head was found wrapped in pants near an East Side subway station. The rest of his body was found a day later. He had tattoos that were meticulously documented and displayed at the Great Lakes Exposition, attracting thousands of people who hoped to identify the boy. The investigators were haunted by by the physical evidence. The cuts through the bone were not jagged. There was no hesitation. This was a killer who took his time, who enjoyed the tactile sensation of bone and sinew yielding to steel. Some of the victims were found weeks after they had died, their remains so badly decomposed that the cause of death could only be guessed at. The killer began leaving the bodies in plain sight, almost as if he were mocking Ness and the police department. In one of the most brazen moves in criminal history, the butcher left 2 torsos within sight of Elliot Ness's office window at City Hall. It was a direct declaration of war. Ness responded with a move that remains controversial to this day. Frustrated by the lack of leads and convinced the killer lived among the transients in the ravine, Ness ordered a massive police raid on Kingsbury Run. In the middle of the night, officers swept through the shanty towns, evicted hundreds of homeless people, and burned the huts to the ground. Ness hoped to flush the killer out, or at least deprive him of his hunting grounds. Instead, he only succeeded in destroying the homes of the city's most vulnerable people and alienating the public. The butcher didn't stop. Despite the lack of a conviction, the police did have a lead suspect, a man named Dr. Francis Sweeney. Sweeney was a veteran of World War I, where he had served in a medical unit performing gruesome battlefield surgeries. He was an alcoholic with a hair-triggered temper, and most importantly, he was the cousin of Congressman Martin Sweeney, Elliot Ness's chief political rival. Ness personally oversaw the interrogation of Dr. Sweeney. For over a week, they held him in a hotel room, subjecting him to a primitive polygraph test. According to reports, Sweeney failed the test miserably. Ness was convinced he had his man. However, the political connections were too strong, without physical evidence linking Sweeney directly to a crime scene, and with the risk of a political firestorm. Ness couldn't make an arrest. Shortly after the interrogation, Sweeney voluntarily committed himself to a psychiatric hospital. The murders stopped. For years afterward, Ness received postcards. They were taunting, cryptic messages signed by a nameless sender who seemed to know intimate details about the investigation. Many believe these were sent by Sweeney from the asylum, a final psychological torture for the man who had failed to catch him. Ness's career never recovered from the Cleveland years. The man who broke Capone was himself broken by a faceless ghost in a ravine. The Cleveland Torso murders remain one of the greatest cold cases in American history. It was a case that sat at the intersection of urban decay and medical precision. It highlighted the terrifying reality that in a crowded city, someone can vanish into thin air, only to reappear as a series of anatomical parts in a muddy ditch. The killer lived in the shadows of the Great Depression, utilizing the chaos of the era to mask his surgical bloodlust. Today, if you walk near the area of Kingsbury Run, the industrial landscape has changed, but the shadows remain. We look back at these crimes and try to apply modern profiling. We talk about psychopathy, surgical skill sets, and the socioeconomic factors of the 1930s. But beneath the academic analysis lies a primal fear. It is the fear of a hunter who doesn't want money or power, but simply wants to see how a human body looks when it is taken apart. In the end, Elliot Ness moved on. The shanty towns were rebuilt, and the victims remained largely nameless, buried in unmarked graves. The city of Cleveland eventually found its peace. But the legend of the torso murderer stays etched into the cold, gray pavement of the Rust Belt. It serves as a grim testament to the fact that even the most legendary lawman can be humbled by a mystery that has no pulse. Thank you for watching today's edition of Twice Told Horror. Please share with family and friends, and always keep the nightlight on.